I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Welcome back to On the Record. I'm Sheila Cast. In 2022, 16 million wage and salary workers in the United States were represented by a union. That was up 220,000 from 2021, a tiny boost. But as a percent of the total workforce, the number of unionized workers remains near historic lows. The push for union representation continues in a range of professions and industries, from car makers to Starbucks baristas to healthcare workers. And efforts to unionize also persist in the ivory towers of U.S. universities and colleges. While faculty in the University System of Maryland, Morgan State, and St. Mary's College do not have the right to collective bargaining, faculty and graduate assistants across the state have been organizing to exert more say about their working conditions. Two academic workers involved in organizing efforts on campuses in Maryland join us now. Jared Ball is professor of Communication and Africana Studies at Morgan State University. He also founded Black Power Media and hosts the podcast iMIXWHATiLIKE. Welcome to the show, Professor Ball.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Also with us is Andrew Eneim. He's a Ph.D. candidate in biophysics and physical chemistry at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. There he has helped organize the Teachers and Researchers United Union. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
Andrew, you're a graduate researcher pursuing your Ph.D. I assume you don't have much spare time. Why spend the time you do have organizing your fellow graduate students?
You're right that it's kind of a big job to be doing this full-time research. But I think a lot of us came together because we realized how important it is to have a say in the conditions that we work under. For a lot of us that have been around as long as I have at Hopkins in grad programs, we had to sort of bear the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic, where a lot of us were declared essential employees if you work in a lab and had to maintain equipment. So we were going back in without much support. We were switching to online teaching without any support. And as inflation was rising, Hopkins was not using their multi-billion-dollar endowment to ensure that we could get a livable wage throughout that process and make it through that. And so a lot of us decided to come together because we saw the way the university was operating, and it was not with the people that run their university in mind, namely the grad workers, as well as a lot of other staff.
And so that union vote was on February 1st, 7 months ago, to organize under the United Electrical, Radio, and Machine Workers. Where does the grad workers union stand right now?
Yeah, so as of right now, we are at the bargaining table with the university.
Professor Ball, efforts at Morgan State are at a much earlier stage, as I understand it. Where do things stand?
Well, as far as things go at Morgan State, they stand basically nowhere. As far as I'm aware, I am going to be just now starting to try to rebuild what can only be an advocacy chapter of the American Association of University Professors. But because we can't legally collectively bargain and don't have the right to unionize as faculty as part of Maryland State's university, well, not as faculty members in the state of Maryland. I was going to say Maryland State system, but Morgan State is not in that system, which presents its own set of problems that are specific to Morgan. But I'm essentially trying to start from scratch to see about developing this chapter or reviving this chapter at Morgan.
The General Assembly has heard testimony on bills to allow faculty at the University of Maryland System, Morgan State, and St. Mary's College to unionize. It didn't make it out of the legislature again this year, but there are calls for Governor Westmore to issue an executive order granting collective bargaining rights to faculty at Maryland's public universities and colleges. Professor Ball, what issues do you think would motivate faculty to back a union if that becomes legal?
The set of issues that I will be approaching, my colleagues with, that many of them are even more experienced with than I am, involve a variety of things, including shared governance, pay compression and equity, arbitrary application of unclear standards, rules, and regulations, obliteration of seniority, rank, and tenure, an emphasis for STEM-related fields, focus, and funding as opposed to liberal arts and critical thinking, and a variety of others. But those are sort of the core issues that I've seen and experienced myself so far in my 18 years at Morgan State. Though I just wanted to make clear that at this moment, I'm only speaking for myself. There is no organized entity at this point, which I again think is part of the problem, particularly in terms of shared governance for faculty. But those are the core issues that should easily inspire faculty to at least consider what improvements may be possible were we to be a little bit better organized.
So, Andrew, you are at the bargaining table. Are the proposals going back and forth what you expected them to be with Johns Hopkins University management when you organized?
Yeah, so the great thing about joining UE is our members get to make all the decisions. And so all the proposals we've put on the table from our side have been democratically decided by our membership. And so exactly what we unionized for, the issues we care about, that's what we're presenting to the university. But what's interesting is what the counter proposals are looking like, where we're seeing this inclination to claim that the current processes for things like discrimination or for sexual harassment are sufficient, when the exact reason we unionized is that those processes as they exist now are not sufficient. And we're having a lot of trouble really hashing that out because the university doesn't seem to have a willingness to entertain the idea that what they have now may not work. And we want that in our contracts because we need to be able to have a fair and usable grievance procedure for issues like that.
This is On the Record. I'm Sheila Cass speaking with Johns Hopkins Ph.D. candidate Andrew Eneim and with Professor Jared Ball on the faculty at Morgan State University since 2006. We're talking about efforts on their campuses to organize academic workers into unions. Professor Ball, I want to get back to the legislation for which you and others testified before the General Assembly in Annapolis in February, urging the lawmakers to extend collective bargaining rights to academic workers in the University System of Maryland, at Morgan State, and at St. Mary's College. That legislation did not pass. What argument did you make about why those rights were important?
Well, I mean, my own arguments, which were specific more to my own experience, are some of what I already outlined. But most of what we were there arguing for was that despite the common mythology about the academic experience and the faculty experience, as you even, I think, accurately outlined in the preface to this question, we are workers. We are a labor force. This idea that all of us exist in luxury, in ivory towers, is part of the fantasy that allows for a lot of abuses to continue to occur. So whether it is appropriate pay, redistribution throughout the university of resources that come into the university, again, anybody at their job wants to know what the standards are for promotion, for tenure, for advancement, for retention, for retention of resources, et cetera. And when they are not clarified and not applied equally and throughout the faculty, it becomes a problem. And then ultimately, because most of us, particularly at historically Black colleges and universities, have oversized workloads and student loads and are under-resourced in terms of assistance, et cetera, and so forth. It's important, I think, that we, as much as anyone, faculty, particularly faculty at HBCUs, be concerned with our standing and our ultimately our only protection, which is to be organized. So when we see tenure being threatened, when we see seniority and rank being threatened, when there is an inequality of pay for both seniority and ranking members of the faculty, but also gender inequality, we, I think, need to do something about it. And as we see nationally with the assaults on higher education and intellectual freedom, I think it's important that faculty, regardless of their place and rank and tenure and seniority, involve themselves in supporting efforts on their campuses to unionize and to collectively bargain.
Andrew, unionizing is political work. Were you involved in politics before your organizing with graduate students at Hopkins?
I wouldn't say overtly political. I was definitely involved in sort of like mass movement, social change organizing while I was in college, but I didn't have a lot of experience with it. I started at Hopkins straight out of my bachelor's degree. And so it was really getting involved with union organizing that really showed me what it looks like to make social change. And this was sort of a guiding path for me to realize where I could put that energy and make an impact. And it appealed to me to really come together, regardless of what your political affiliation is, come together with academic workers, your coworkers across the university, and make changes that you all benefit from, and set aside differences and realize that we're actually on the same page. And we need to be making these changes for not only for ourselves, but also for the future generations of grad workers that are going to come into our institutions.
I'm grateful to you both for giving us some insight into what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Andrew Eneim is a Ph.D. candidate in biophysics and physical chemistry at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Jared Ball is professor of Communication and Africana Studies at Morgan State University. We asked Morgan State for a comment on faculty organizing efforts but did not get a reply. A spokesperson for Johns Hopkins University said the administration is working, quote, amicably and constructively, close quote, with the Academic Workers Union to negotiate an agreement. Over more than a dozen sessions, the university said, the bargaining teams have covered an array of issues and reached tentative agreements on 9 articles, including a grievance and arbitration procedure. I'm Sheila Cast. Glad you're with us on The Record. Come back tomorrow.